call to order the Audit Committee meeting, April 24th, 2008. And the meeting has been properly noticed and posted in compliance with the open meeting law. Mr. Redline?
As far as I know, they have been. As usual with our clerk's office, they're on top of it.
Let the record reflect accordingly. Item number 3 is the approval of the final minutes for the March 27, 2008 Audit Committee meeting. Corrections or additions?
I move to approve.
Motion on the floor. All those in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Motion carries. Item number 4 will be a general report from the City Auditor. Mr. Snelding?
Thank you, Mr. Chairman and members of the committee. Currently, the following audits and projects are in process. HR Personnel Services, Information Systems and Records is being led by Nancy Beatty. It's in the field work close to the reporting stage. Parking ticket collection, lead officer on that is Philip Marmarowski. It's in the field work stage. Metro Police funding, Brian Smith, and that's in the planning phase. Sanitary Sewer System Maintenance Division, Brian Smith, that's in the field work stage. Pool cash handling was done by a contractor. It's in the reporting phase. Credit card receiving, Bill Seymour, that particular one is on hold at this time. Software, Philip Marmarowski, it's in the field work stage. Purchasing professional services contracts is Philip Marmarowski, and that's in the planning stage. As far as, next slide please. As far as investigations and control reviews, we have 13 investigations that are in process at this time, and 2 memos have been released. Since January 1, 2008, the following training has been completed in fulfillment of the 2008 training requirements. These first 2 up here were self-study courses. The ethics, the fiscal security, the mortgage fraud, construction audit, and fraud were luncheon meetings. 2 were at no cost because they were paid through our membership. The prevention of fraud was a USDA course, which included travel. Other than the self-study training courses, none had a completion test at the end. This concludes my report, Mr. Chairman.
Very good. Comments or questions?
I move for acceptance of the report.
There's a motion on the floor. All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? That report has been accepted. Item number 5, discussion of possible action on audit of Metropolitan Police funding. Mr. Snelding?
Yes, thank you, Councilman Brown. As I stated before, Jerry Carroll, the Clark County auditor, stated that Clark County does not want to participate in this particular audit. We will continue to investigate proceeding on our own. We will contact the Sheriff's Office to determine if they do not want an audit unless Clark County is represented in the process. And depending on the answer, we will recommend our next action. This concludes my report on this issue.
Comments or questions?
I have a question. Did you give a reason for their lack of desire to assist?
He said that because of funding, they didn't want to participate, basically.
Okay. Councilman, please.
Refresh my memory, Brad, as to what are we trying to find out? What are our motivations in conducting such an audit?
This was the first audit that the city has initiated or attempted to initiate with the Sheriff's Office. And what we were trying to do was look at the funding formula to determine, just generally looking at the data that goes in, how it's calculated, the results as they come out, and just do an evaluation of that. That was not too difficult a task, but still, when we began to speak with the Sheriff's Department about that because of the funding that Clark County provides, the funding that the City of Las Vegas provides. They said they would like to have both of us participate in it. That would make it so that if we found something very different, they wouldn't be caught in the middle of an argument between us and the county, which I think makes sense. So in looking at this and talking about this, what we wanted to do was release an RFP and hire an outside third party to come in and do that audit for us, and the City of Las Vegas and Clark County would pay the bill on that.
Is it feasible to conduct such an audit when, and these are my terms, when two of the three players don't want to participate? Are we still able to conduct an audit which would be reliable when the other funding source and the fundee, the recipient of this revenue, doesn't want to participate?
Well, I would recommend that if we do come back and the Sheriff's Department decides they want the two major funding sources to be involved in it, my suggestion would be that we would invite the county to be involved in it, even if they didn't pay for it, so that they could review it and see the results of the work, and would actually be a party to it, even if they didn't pay for it, so that we could proceed with it. And I guess that's my question to the Sheriff's Department.
And I'd just like to make this comment is, I think things are, especially with this budget cycle, things are becoming more important when the city and the county, both independently, are constantly looking at the funding mechanisms. I think the percentage this year was cities 40%, county 60% of Metro's budget.
Excuse me, Mr. Chair, we're having some technical difficulties. We don't want to lose any of the information you're giving, and we want to make sure your question gets on the record. Could we take like a 5-minute recess while we look at this? Thank you so much.
We're in recess.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. We have our issue resolved. Did we restart?
All right, we will call back to order the Audit Committee meeting. And just to finish the comments I was making, to follow up with my colleagues, I know that the sheriff is going to be heading up to Carson City for the session in 2009 to ask for the second half of the More Cops initiative. And I think it's imperative that we ask him again as far as his support for this document, because it can only help him making the case as far as Metro as an organization, having an outside group take a look at them, identify their strengths and certainly the opportunities to improve. I would perhaps, with the committee's approval, Red, if you could talk to your counterpart in Metro, and perhaps the committee chair could talk to the sheriff as far as getting this off the ground. Let's see. I guess we'll entertain a motion to accept that.
Make that motion.
Motion on the floor. All those in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Motion carries with that direction. Item number 6.
Mr. Chairman, this item has to do with the FY 2009 City Auditor Office budget. It's a carryover from our previous meeting of March the 27th. As I said, during the subsequent to the meeting that we had on March the 27th, on March the 31st, the City Council met in a budget hearing. Mark Vincent, the Finance and Business Services Director, said that he had attended our Audit Committee meeting. He further stated that the committee asked that they take a look at restoring some of the previously noted cuts, if not all of them. Mr. Vincent stated that he would take the details as related to the meeting as supplied by me. He would then return to see if the council wanted to do so. I have supplied Mr. Vincent with the details as requested in the meeting, And as a result of our last meeting on the budget, I have prepared a presentation to review your decisions and to answer questions that came up during the meeting. The committee approved the office supplies, computer supplies, and software maintenance agreement as presented in the audit by the City Auditor's Office. Additionally, the committee approved the long-term controllable cost as recommended by the City Auditor's Office. As part of this, the committee approved the conversion from desktop to laptop computers for audit staff. Mr. Kern questioned the $2,300 charge for maintenance computer. Subsequent to the meeting, he was supplied with a detailed backup that was calculated by Information Technologies. Training was approved at the no restrictions level. Mr. Kern had questions regarding detail to back up the $2,000 per employee request for training. Examples of training related to this budget are noted on this particular slide. Next slide. As you can see, examples of locally available, I'm sorry, I was wrong. I got you on the wrong one. It's the previous one. As you can see, examples of locally available training include the Association of Certified Fraud Examiners and the Institute of Internal Auditors. Training that requires travel are listed on this particular slide. Providers include U.S. Department of Agriculture, the Association of Local Government Auditors, Association of Certified Fraud Examiners, and the Institute of Internal Auditors. Locations are varied, and the costs include an estimate for travel expense. The balance of the required 40 hours of CPE would be made up by local training provided as a result of membership in organizations at no cost or at a reduced cost. All noted training is without testing to successfully complete the course. Additional travel and training issues were approved as noted. Membership in the Western Intergovernmental Audit Forum was approved, and membership to IIA, the CFE, and ALGA were also approved. Additionally, study books were funded at the rate recommended by the City Auditor's Office. Professional certifications and peer review costs were approved at the level recommended by the City Auditor's Office. Contract consultants were approved at the $25,000 level. The substitute employee was reinstated at the audit by the Audit Committee with the following understanding. This category is to be balanced between the contract consultants and the substitute employee, as the hours for the substitute employee are at a lower rate, which would be a more effective use of funds. To that end, I plan to try to recruit an intern to function as an assistant auditor. Next, I will look for a paraprofessional with training in auditing to provide audit assistance. In order to leverage clerical tasks, I will recruit a clerical substitute to address only relief-type work. Finally, I will utilize a contract consultant only as a last option. As noted in the motion, salaries and benefits will not be adjusted, and salary and benefit treatment will be reflective of executive and appointed compensation. This concludes my report on the budget.
Comments or questions?
I do have a question. Mr. Kern had most of the questions, as you've noted in here, as we went over all this. Has he seen this final rendering? Does this concur with his recollection of what we set forth?
Yes, I've supplied this presentation to him, and he's aware of it.
He didn't have further question about any item?
No, he did not indicate any to me, Mr. Workman.
Mr. Vincent, what's our status now as far as understanding that the City Council heard this presentation and you are working at least to address this?
For the record, Mark Vincent, Director of Finance and Business Services. As you know, Chairman Brown, we did make the presentation to the budget workshop. I believe we also, in our regularly scheduled briefings, we discussed what the major items were, and I think and just in summary, the adding back of the substitute employee, the contract consultants, and the additional training, that constituted the bulk of what the audit committee was recommending that we would add back to the budget. As you know, we did not take an action from the budget workshop. The next meeting would be the next budget hearing is May 20th. And that's when council would then take an action. And I don't know, I was thinking about this yesterday, I don't know that I've received any direction from council on what to do with the request from the audit committee. But that action will have to be taken, a decision will have to be made on the May 20th budget hearing. So that's where we're at.
We don't have anything, the City of Las Vegas has nothing planned prior to May 20th?
Not at this point, other than additional briefings. And I think the way we would go about this is, we knew we were going to have some changes to the final budget. So as we approach the May 20th, we're going to have to brief you again on what our recommendations are going to be, and hopefully what we present to you on May 20th would be the final budget. So if the sense of council is that these, in management, that these things should be restored, then that's the direction we'll go, and you'll approve the budget on May 20th.
Other comments or questions?
So the question that I would have is our acceptance of this would be our proposal for this to go to the budget. If there are no further questions, I would make that motion.
Very good. Motion on the floor. All those in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Thank you. Accepted. Item number 7.
It's a discussion and possible action on the report from the Director of Finance and Business Services on outstanding parking ticket balance. At the December 6, 2007 Audit Committee meeting, the committee asked a representative from Finance and Business Services to report on the outstanding parking ticket balance. Mr. Benson, the Director of Finance and Business Services, is here and will make that presentation at this time.
Thank you. Mr. Vincent.
Mr. Chairman, if you indulge me a second, I'll pass this out for you. I thought it would be, again, Mark Vincent, Director of Finance and Business Services, it would be helpful to talk a little bit about our collection process that we're still actually tweaking to some extent. But before I do that, if I could have you flip to the second page. What this chart is indicating is that the number of citations that we've been writing in the current fiscal year are less than what we wrote in the prior year. So we have about I think it's about a 6% decrease in our overall citations that were being issued. The next page shows the revenue that we've actually been collecting. And you'll see that our revenue that we're collecting is actually up about a little over 15%. And so what we're experiencing is this last year, even though the number of citations that we've been writing is down, we've seen a significant increase in revenue collections. And if you skip to the third slide, that's the graphic representation of the change in the number of ticket citations versus the revenue that we've collected.
Mr. Chairman, if you don't mind, why are we collecting more money for less citations issued? Are the fines higher, or are our collection practices better?
We have not made any changes in the fines. I think that this is just indicative of the results of the implementation of the audit recommendations from the audit report on tickets. Sherry Bonnet, who is the supervisor of parking ticket collections, who's here, as well as her manager, Vanetta Appleyard, are here. We have been concentrating our efforts on collection, and we've done a few things a little bit differently, and I'd like to tell you a little bit about that, but I think that's generally what's happening here is we've took the audit findings to heart, and we're trying to step up our collection efforts. And parking tickets is a difficult thing to collect because it's not It's not something we adjudicate in municipal court, although you could. We typically try to run it through the hearings, administrative hearings process. But our average ticket's probably in the neighborhood of $45 when you blend all the different ticket amounts and the numbers of tickets we issue. So it's hard to spend a lot of collection effort on what is essentially a $45 fine that we haven't yet adjudicated. We don't know if they're guilty or not. And one of the things, for example, this was the media report that hit the news a while ago. We had a situation, for example, where a person had, I think there were three $250 handicap violations. And those fines doubled and tripled, and she ended up having a $2,250 outstanding fine, where she actually had a valid placard. Getting her to come in to demonstrate she had a valid placard dropped the fine to failure to display, which was a $75 fine. So we collected $75 on what appeared to be a $2,250 outstanding violation. So parking tickets are difficult. Till you finally get them in and get the person in to either appeal or pay, we're not sure what we're going to ultimately collect. The last graph, before I talk a little bit about the procedures, I think Sherry's been with us now for a couple of years. I think she just took a couple years with us. And this graph shows by year of ticket issuance, how much we collected in the first year versus the second year versus the third year. And what this graph tells us is what you probably would intuitively assume, and that is, if you really make a lot of effort to collect as soon as possible, that's where you're going to collect the most money. If you delay collection, if things slow down for whatever reason, if our process isn't tight, if we wait for a year or two to really step up collections, you're likely not going to collect anything. So we really have been trying to step up our collection efforts in that first year. And so that's what this graph is telling us, is that indeed, the more effort we place in that first year of the ticket, the better off we are. So let me take you back to the front page, because again, tickets are a little bit difficult for us, and they have some nuances in the collections.
Excuse me, when do we give up?
Well, we do send them to collections. At some point, we will write them off as a bad debt, but we'll keep them. We never eliminate them from the system. They're always out there. By some chance, we come across them in some other fashion, then we'll continue to pursue them. But essentially, we send them for collections at around 270 days, which sounds like a long way out, and I'm going to explain why that is right now. But we send them. Ultimately, the final step is, we can't collect through the DMV hold. We've sent all of the notice letters. They're not on the boot list. We finally send them to collections, and if collection doesn't catch them, then that's about as much effort as we can do to collect essentially a $45 ticket. You can see the notice requirements. On the third notice, that's a new notice. We weren't doing a third notice. Since we've implemented the third notice, we've actually collected $495,000 just by sending a third notice. It seems like such a simple thing to do, but just by adding another notice, and that notice tells them, of course, that we're going to send it to, that we may send it to collections if they don't pay. That has brought in $500,000 of extra revenue just by doing the third notice. The DMV ticket hold, this is it's a great...
Over a one-year period or over...
How long have we...
July 6th of last year.
So it's about a little less than a year.
Excuse me, Mr. Chairman. I'm trying to put that in perspective because I'm looking at your chart, and it looks like the total revenue amount never exceeded about $300,000. I'm not sure if I put your statement about the $500,000 reference this chart.
Yeah, I don't think those are, you're comparing an increase in one case to the number of tickets are down. So in essence, what you really got is about a 20% increase in collections when you consider that we've got a 6% decrease in the number of tickets written versus a 15% increase in collections. So
how much money are we spending? I'm trying not to shove you off your course too much, but how much money are we spending versus collecting? Are we losing money?
No, we're not losing money on the collections. In fact, the parking tickets fall into an enterprise fund called the Parking Enterprise Fund. And the Parking Enterprise Fund is funded by the parking meters, some rental revenue of garages that we lease, city-owned garages that we lease. We have 2 of those. And then obviously fines and penalties from the collection process. The cost that is absorbed by the enterprise fund is the parking ticket enforcement, which is the D&E side of that, the metering and the booting and the writing of the tickets and that sort of thing, plus Sherry's function, the parking ticket collections. And we are running about $1 million to the good. And that $1 million that the enterprise fund generates in positive cash flow theoretically is then used to help enhance other parking projects somewhere down. Some of that money is pledged on bond issues for parking garages, for example. When the D&B hold, which is a little bit strange, it costs us $10 to place the hold. We typically wait 45 days until past due. We don't send the hold out immediately. But because it has to be timed with when the registration is going to expire, there isn't any point in sending a hold out to D&B before the registration is going to expire. So we typically look at the window, we look at is the ticket 45 days old, and is it 60 days within renewal of the registration? Then we'll place the hold out. Because typically, we're paying the $10 whether we collect on the ticket or not. So we don't want to pay the $10 if we can collect it internally by, through the first or second or third notice.
And we have a human being that actually does that review?
Yes, we actually have a human being that logs into, we have access into the D&B system to place these holds.
How many parking tickets a month do we write?
Do we write?
Well, issue.
Right here's the month by month.
Yeah, I'm sorry.
8,000 almost in May.
Yeah.
Or May of last year.
We're
Right
probably
around
running 6,000 to 7,000.
67.
The trouble with this is if you don't transfer your plate, if the registration expires or you just turn in the plate and re-register a new car, there's no way to trace that. The hold won't work. And so what we find historically is that the hold works about 40% of the time. 60% of the time the registration expires or they renew. And so in a news report that indicated we had only put holds on 2 vehicles, that's because the other 8 top offenders, the registrations were expired. You can't put a hold on something that doesn't exist. The hold is placed on that registration, not on the driver themselves. The boot, we do issue a boot letter on a quarterly basis when we have somebody that has either more than $500 in outstanding tickets or more than 5 citations. We send out a boot letter. The combination of the boot letter and the failure to appear letter, since we've been doing that, that's resulted in about $62,000 in extra collections. So that's been helpful. We do have a current collection agent, that's Credit Bureau Central. We went out on an RFP to competitively compete that contract. We were looking for someone that might have a little more legal clout and be able to collect in out-of-state more for us because we have a significant out-of-state tickets. We've run into a roadblock in the sense that we weren't clear enough in the request for proposal that you have law required to be a collection agent. You have to have an office in Nevada. And the one law firm that specializes in this that bid on the RFP did not have a Nevada office. So our response to that is the plan of action today is we're going to let that RFP expire. We're going to rewrite the requirements documents. We may add some additional scope of work, perhaps even as a result of animal control or other things. And we're going to put that back out in bid. And we know of 2 national law firms now that are interested in this thing. We think that's the kind of person that we're going to help us with. So we're going to have to restart the RFP process all over again. But currently, CBC charges a 20% collection fee. We are, one of our problems with the current collection process is we do not pass the collection fee on to the person who got the ticket, who pays the fine. With DMV, they collect, if they collect on the registration, DMV collects the $10 hold fee, so we get reimbursed for that. We are currently working with the City Attorney's Office to see if we can pass our collection fee on to the owner as well. We have recently, with Sherry's efforts, we got quite a few vehicles that don't have registration, don't have plates, and so we have been using a new software that allows us to trace the VIN number, so at least we find out, we can get a name and address, and we can include those in the collection process. Historically, we have about 31% of our outstanding fines and penalties is VIN numbers. There's no registration, so we're now trying to find a way to locate those people. And then out of states, we do have the ability in all 50 states to run plates in other states. We can't do a DMV hold, but we certainly get information, and again, that's why we were interested in the RFP with someone who maybe would be better equipped to collect those out-of-state tickets. And then rental cars, we do have an ordinance that requires rental car agencies to provide us the data within 7 days of who the renter was. They have indicated that 7 days is too short of a time around, so we're contemplating an ordinance that gives them a little extra time so they're not always violating municipal code because they can't meet the 7 days. But this has also been effective, and usually the agencies are pretty cooperative and helpful in allowing us to find those folks. So those are some of the things that we're doing, and I do think it's been successful. We still have a lot more work to do. Some of these time frames I think could be sped up a little bit. For example, we talk about putting things on collection in 270 days. Part of that's to let the DMV cycle go through. It's difficult in our system, if not impossible, to have two separate collection efforts going, knowing that we have a DMV collection over here and we have a collection agent collection over here. We're also limited that if we've already sent something to collection, if we send it to collection too early before the registration is up for hold, then we can't place the DMV hold. So timing's everything, but we're still looking at the schedules and seeing if some of these things we can tighten up. We think we can shorten up the third late notice. We think we can shorten that up by another maybe 60 to 90 days. That's possible. So anyway, that's my report on the things we've been trying to do, and I do think the changes we've made have been successful, and it's demonstrated by the increase in revenue collections.
Mark, what the CDC, what percentage or total dollar amount in the aggregate revenue? What do they generate for us?
I don't know that off the top of my head. I don't know if Sherry does.
It's between 3 and 5%. That's another reason when we're trying to find some another agency.
For the record, I know you didn't hear that, but Sherry Bond indicated 3 to 5% of our collections are coming through CBC. So I think that was one of the audit recommendations, if I recall, and that's why we went out to RFP. And unfortunately, we're just going to have to do it again. I think if we go with a larger national firm that has sometimes a letter from a lawyer has a little more meaning than a letter from a collection agency.
That's one of the reasons, if I may, Mr. Chairman, that I made the recommendation back when, as you create that RFP, that you meet with some, it doesn't matter to me who, I gave a couple of names, that meet with somebody who has the latest technique. And again, there's one of them in town, I know you met with, I don't know about the other one, but and he indicated to me that he responded to half of your RFP, but the other was too small and too old, I guess. Or,
yeah, I think you're right. I think what you find, even with the firms that have a law background, their investment is mostly in technology. I mean, they're heavily invested in technology and all the latest ways of finding these people. And then it's most of it is just finding these people. Once you lose track of where they are and where they move to, and if you don't know where they are, it's hard to collect them. So most of it's the investment in technology to locate them, and then once you find them, a threatening letter from a law firm has a lot more success. So
Well, the good
you're
news
exactly
is,
right, Paul.
the one I'm talking about, I don't know about the other one. They may be too, and there may be others, but the one I'm talking about has an attorney inside, so you don't even need to reconfigure. But we can talk about that beyond. My question, the late notice at 180, that you said is good, that third letter, that's sometimes effective. Do we put on that letter that a DMV hold may be in the offing as well?
No. Do we, I don't even know if we put it in any of our letters.
It seems to me like that would be, if I get one of those, and I know that, collection agents are going to run, I would like to avoid that, but if I know a DMV hold may be placed, that may get me further attentive.
The thought does occur to me, if you saw the newscast, the number one guy on our list, actually his strategy was that he kept letting his registration, he was buying a new used vehicle every year to avoid being caught through DMV registration. So sometimes if they know how the game's played, they work the game. So,
Well, my next question would be, do we ever do a name? Of course, the collection agencies can, especially if they're large. If you've got a $45 item, I'm with you all the way. I mean, you're not going to go far for that, nor do I think you should. But if you get to the 500 range or whatever, you may be having a habitual complainant for several people, and a good collection agency may have someone else he owes. They skip trace those, and they can find others and help one another. So my question is, in any of these, do we do any kind of a name comparison? Maybe they do it a skip trace at the collection agency. Do we ever do a name search? To see if they have valid address in the town and everything. So a lot of them don't. My next question.
just track Sherry over here.
No, the nod is good enough.
That's not good enough for the clerk. That was Sherry indicated yes.
I can say, thank you, Sherry, for the affirmative nod. The next question I have is the 30% that have no plates. If they pull that up and can find, as you indicated, the name of the people, they should be able to tell, I'm guessing, or at least Metro could, whether that's a recent registration. Because if it isn't recent, brand new recent, they need a plate on that car. Am I being facetious to think Metro would have interest in that?
Well, if your question is can we use the VIN number then to put a hold on a different plate? Is that what your question was?
No, my question would be, if they don't have a plate on there, we pull up a name that doesn't show a recent registration, we need to call Metro and have them tow the car. If it doesn't have a plate and it isn't a recent registration, I think it breaks a Nevada law about having a plate.
Well, the parking enforcement would deal with the issue if they have a vehicle that has an unregistered plate. They're going to do the ticketing, and the only time that we're involved with booting and towing is when we have them on the boot list. I'm not familiar enough with enforcement, so I know what else could be done.
I'm wondering if maybe we want to talk to Doug about it and see if he has some people attended. As we know, this is a transit community, and some of the time, people will steal a car somewhere else, not in Nevada, and it will end up in Nevada. These people are on the run somewhere. They take the plates off, so you don't know where it's come from, and you can DMV it sometimes on the serial number. But if there is no plate in evidence, I have a feeling maybe that the sheriff would have a desire, but maybe this is just a conversation.
I don't know that we've married up with the Metro side of things, but certainly it's something we can look at as a way of locating folks.
Mr. Chairman, I don't think those people are worried about a parking ticket.
Right.
What percentage of the parking ticket recipients pay their tickets the first time around, send in their check?
It's got to be well under 50%. It's got to be somewhere in the probably 30-40%. Yeah, it's well under 50%.
Here's my point, is that if 30% write the check and send in their money, is there something we should be looking to? Why do those people send in their check versus the person who doesn't send in their check? Are they afraid of something? Are they responsible? So perhaps in our notice when we give them a ticket, we leave them a written thing on a ticket. Perhaps in the information we give them, we could draft it in such a way to give more people the incentive to send in the check. If people think nothing's going to happen, they may not write in the check, but if they're told, assuming these people read the notices, that there are consequences in not sending in the check, maybe a greater percentage of people would send in the check.
We're looking at a couple things along that line, and I think that's a good. If we make it difficult for them to pay or come down, then that's an issue. We do have online payments. We get a lot of collections through online, so that's made it convenient, especially for the out-of-state folks. We've never had a ticket moratorium in Las Vegas. We've never done that. We've done it for municipal court. And so that's something that Sherry is suggested that she's got with Muni Court. She's talked to them about their moratorium. We think that would be an effective way to enhance our collections and maybe get some of this old stuff out of the way. People may be afraid to come down because once they know that their penalties are stacking up, the penalties oftentimes are 2-3 times what the ticket is. That can be deterrent. And if we can get that out of the way, maybe people would come in and pay. I also worry that we have a language barrier and how we, what and how we place on the ticket, on the windshield. That's something we probably can work with parking enforcement on what that is.
Is the ticket in Spanish?
I don't know if there's any.
5% of our community is Hispanic.
I think there's some, Tim Shepard mentioned enforcement, there's the information on how to get a hold of the department and that there is Spanish on it.
But it still can be intimidating, I'm sure, for some folks. So, yeah, I think there's still a lot more that we can do. There's just no doubt. There's always room for improvement. And but parking tickets they're hard to collect. Just by particularly in this town, the nature of it is they're hard to collect. And we don't want to spend more than it's worth to collect them. So that's why we're always trying to pay attention. How much do you do? And do you send them to collections earlier, only then to have the DMV hold perhaps work? I mean, some of that may not make any sense. How do you then collect on the, if we collect on DMV, then we're also liable to pay for the collection agent, their share. So some of that's timing and cost-wise a little tricky, but I think we can still run for improvement.
Very good. Entertain a motion. Thank you, Mark. Second. Motion on the floor. All those in favor, say aye. Opposed, and that report is accepted. Item number 8.
Discussion and possible action on the annual audit recommendation follow-up. This is as of June the 30th, 2007. The City Auditor's Office has provided 1,004 audit recommendations requiring corrective action to city departments since January the 1st, 1999. This report summarizes the status of these audit recommendations as of June the 30th, 2007. The objectives of our follow-up program is to ensure that audit recommendations are being appropriately addressed by city management and to track the status of the recommendations. Much of the benefit from audit work is not the findings reported or the recommendations made, but in their effective resolution. City management is responsible for addressing audit recommendations. The follow-up is a process to help management fulfill this responsibility. Our follow-up program is in accordance with Operating Instruction A50 of the City Auditor's Office Operating Instruction Manual. The following status of each recommendation is identified by using the classifications complete, as in, and the recommendation has been implemented, or some other action has been taken to effectively correct the deficiency. Incomplete, the recommendation has not been implemented. Extended, the recommendation has not been implemented due to circumstances beyond the control of the department and not due. The due date is after June 30th, 2007. For each audit recommendation, city management provides an estimated completion date, and audit recommendation is classified as not being due until the date has passed, and then the audit recommendation becomes incomplete or extended. An audit recommendation remains in one of these classifications until city management completes the recommendation and notifies our office. Subsequently, audit staff obtain and evaluate evidence supporting management's representations. If the evidence demonstrates that the recommendation has been adequately addressed, the auditor identifies the recommendation as being complete. In conclusion, the incomplete recommendation summary table lists the number of incomplete recommendations by department. There are a total of 13 incomplete recommendations, 3 in field operations, 2 in finance and business services, and 8 in leisure services. Subsequent to the issuance of the reports, 2 of the 3 in field operations have been completed, and the 2 in finance and business services have been completed. 9 recommendations remain incomplete, 1 in the field operations and 8 in leisure services. 1 remaining in field operations is related to the audit of Durango Hills Golf Course Management Contract. The issue is with property tax. The question is whether the current outsourcing arrangement with Durango Hills Golf Course qualifies for tax exemption. This item has been referred to the City Attorney's Office, and John Redline, who's here today, may have a comment on this particular issue.
I'm sorry, Ralph.
It's on the letter that was sent up. It has to do with the property tax on Durango Hills Golf Course. I think the letter's been sent to the City Attorney's Office, and it hasn't been worked through quite yet.
I haven't got an agreement out of the county tax assessor that this property should not be subject to property tax. Their theory by which they tax it is that there is a private entrepreneur occupying the property and turning a profit by that occupation. In the sense that we had leased a piece of land to a private entrepreneur to occupy, there's no doubt about it. He needs to pay the property tax, the value of that piece of land as he occupies it and profitably uses it. The problem I've got with the taxation on this parcel is that the folks who are out there are a management company that we're paying $96,000 a year to operate our golf course for us. We didn't lease it to them. They're a paid vendor or concessionaire in the sense that we might have farmed out, well, it's quite like if we farmed out mowing the grass on a property, or at night if we farmed out security responsibility to Pinkertons and they occupy it at night. They're performing a chore on our property. The contract by which we engage them makes very plain that they acquire no property right by their management contract with us to be out there. And if y'all can recall, we built this golf course. Every bit of it we paid for. And unlike some of the other golf course properties that we own that are operated more like leased properties, every nickel that comes in out there is taken by our contract manager and put in Mark Benson's bank account. So we get all the profit to the extent that there is any. And when I did the research, I found case law from around the country, interestingly, in more than one jurisdiction on golf course properties that were operated in precisely this fashion. And the case law is universally favorable to our position and contrary to that taken by the county tax assessor. Unfortunately, there's one case that comes from the state of Nevada which nobody can understand, and it has to do with one of the federal concessionaires who was out at the test site occupying property out there, and one of the northern, or the county in question, I can't remember if it was Mineral or Churchill, decided they wanted to tax that occupation. It was Reynolds or somebody out there. It was a major contractor for the feds. And our Supreme Court suggested that they needed to pay tax on the value of the federal land they were occupying at the test site. So that case works against us, but there are two solutions. Number one, I presented the case law to the DA's office. They've promised to digest it, and there's a new deputy DA advising the county tax assessor, and I think he's a little more sympathetic to our circumstance. There's one other angle that I haven't entirely worked out with them, and that is we never bothered to designate this golf course as a city park when we built it, and it certainly has every component of being a recreational facility that's open to the public that we spent with our tax dollars and exists only to provide recreational opportunities to our citizens. I think if we designate this as a park, a city park, we may well dodge this issue. So I think that we've got a solution almost in hand, and I have to confess that I thought I'd given specific direction to finance not to pay the tax bill this year because I was so confident I was going to be able to work this out one way or another. And staff has advised me there's no impediment to us declaring this facility a park. We just never bothered to do it in the past, but we can. And in Councilman Brown's ward, and he's informed me that it doesn't bother him and would suit him just fine. I can't imagine that the council would feel differently about it, having a park sign on it instead of golf facility. But the taxes got paid for this year. And as has happened in the past, it's paid under protest. So I think our capability to recover only goes back to the prior tax year. So I want to make sure we don't pay again, and within the next month or two, hope to have this settled one way or another. And I've discussed this with the city attorney. He's prepared to litigate it if they don't back down, because the case law from the other states, as I said, there's like 6 or 8 cases I found on golf courses with exactly this situation. And in every instance where we've done a deal like we did with the Angel Park folks, where they actually control the property and are keeping the profits from the operation, or with Mr. Walters on the golf course, particularly at Desert Pines here, he's got to pay the property tax. He's controlling the property as if he leased it. But in a situation like this, it's no different than if we brought in a concessionaire to run the snack bar. They don't pay property tax on the piece of real estate that the snack bar sits on, and they shouldn't be. But I think they've confused what we've got at Durango Hills with what Mr. Walters or the Angel Park folks have out at that facility, and it's just not the same. So this is unsolved, but I have hopes that we will solve it soon.
Thank you, Joe. Questions?
But I would just mention that throughout the country, municipalities that own golf courses per se and create them or buy them or get them gifted to them or whatever, they do that. They hire someone just to take the money for them in their behalf. That's the overwhelming majority of those types of golf courses. So you have wonderful case law for you.
The cases,
I can't imagine we'll have any trouble getting it.
Except for the one at the test site, all of these cases make perfect sense to me. If we surrender control of the property to somebody else, they're profiting by their legal occupation of the property. They ought to be paying the taxes. If it's an arrangement like we have, they should not be paying the taxes. It's that pesky Nevada case that's so difficult to understand, and I have no idea why it was decided the way it was. It's just, I think that's the thing that has made the knee-jerk reaction from our county tax assessor. Something that he always wants to take that position. I think we can make them fold up.
Yeah, I think that's not apples and oranges. Reynolds got a lot of money. The other thing I would mention, and that is, this is for the council, of course, not the audit, is as you do that as a park, you could do it and say, as any other city park, that beautiful clubhouse that's out there, if there's not another occasion in there and someone wants to rent it for that, then you do it like you would a Bowery or anything else. You just have the people be there to help them. That way it's park status all the way, and that way many people could...
Mr. Workman, I think we're already covered on that. I worked on that contract originally with the finance people, purchasing people by which we found and engaged this outfit. They have that capability. They're supposed to do marketing, and if there's no golf tournament on a slow day, renting out that clubhouse for a wedding is something that's within their power to do. That's profit that we like to have if it doesn't interfere with the golf program.
So that really does give it a park appeal.
Mark, is that an annual bill?
Yes.
Do you know off the top of your head the amount?
It's 50-ish, I think.
I was going to say 6.
Well, I'd like to move with the specific direction to City Council. They certainly will vote on it, but follow Mr. Redline's recommendation as far as this year's been paid under protest. but to pursue, ultimately perhaps litigation, but to pursue a city position that we will not pay in any future years.
Mr. Vincent's gang pays bills as soon as they come in.
No late charge.
Sorry to find that
Duly
out.
noted.
I put that in the form of recommendation.
Thank you.
All those in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Motion carries.
The remaining 8 are leisure services, and Brian Smith will report on those.
I guess that motion might have been premature, so I would just keep it specific to that first item.
Good morning. In September 2006, our office issued 2 audit reports related to SafeKey. The audits included unannounced cash counts at SafeKey sites and a review of payment collection controls. These audits resulted in the audit recommendations shown on this slide. SafeKey, as you're aware, is a before and after school recreational enrichment program provided in partnership by the city and the Las Vegas Community Schools. And this program is held each morning and afternoon in the cafeterias of approximately 69 elementary schools. There are approximately 300 SafeKey employees that are managed by a group of city leisure services staff for this program. During our audit, we identified the need for evaluation and clarification on fee policies, prepayment requirements, program fees, late fees, improved oversight by recreation leaders of SafeKey payment processing to reduce the risk of skimming. We identified the need for improved enforcement of the parent sign-in requirement and the need for improvements to forms and reports used. We also found the need for improvements to the SafeKey unpaid balance collection program, including the identification of roles and responsibilities of staff. We identified the need for enhancements to SafeKey system module of the class system, the need for improved enforcement of cash handling policies and procedures, and the need for uniform signage at all the sites. These 8 recommendations addressed the internal control improvements needed in the SafeKey operations. Considering the inherent risk of theft at 69 remote locations with cash transactions and a limited number of staff for supervisory oversight, we believe that it's very important that these audit recommendations be fully addressed. By implementing the recommendations within these reports, leisure services will strengthen the internal controls over cash collections, reduce the opportunity for theft of revenues at SafeKey sites, and improve the amount and timeliness of unpaid balance collections. During the summer of 2007, SafeKey Management provided us with updated policies and procedures and stated that the audit recommendations had been implemented. Our office subsequently began our follow-up verification process, including reviewing updated policies and procedures, analyzing SafeKey activity in the class system, visiting 4 SafeKey sites, attending a couple training sessions, and holding meetings with leisure services and SafeKey staff members and management. Our preliminary follow-up verification procedures revealed that while efforts had been made towards addressing the recommendations had not yet been fully addressed or implemented at the sites. In September 2007, we communicated the results of our preliminary verification procedures with Leisure Services Management and said that our office would restart our follow-up verification procedures once management had more time to implement changes and were satisfied that the recommendations had been fully addressed. On March 27th of this year, we received notification from SafeKey Management that they were now ready for us to restart our audit recommendation follow-up verification procedures. We anticipate being able to begin these procedures next month, and the recommendations will be identified as being complete once we are satisfied that they have been fully addressed. And this is the current status of our follow-up efforts.
Thank you. What's your question?
I have one question. I used to be on the board of a community school that does a SafeKey and got to know Mark Norman. Does he still run those?
He is no longer involved.
He's not any longer.
Management of the SafeKey.
The question I have, is there been any pushback from the centers about any of these being unreasonable to implement? Like the signage, in other words, the city provides the signage to them, they just have to put it up. I mean, are all of these thought to be by management reasonable, and they just haven't been implemented? What's the...
The organization of community schools has changed. In fact, when was it? Back in 2002? And so the community school advisory boards are just that. They're just provide perform an advisory function.
So safety is all, is city employees all the way, et cetera?
Well, the community school still exists. The community school organization has a 501c3 nonprofit organization. The 300 safety employees that are involved with the operation are community school employees under the umbrella of the 501c3. But these employees, as I mentioned, are monitored by leisure services employees.
Right. So there hasn't been pushback from them as to the fact that any of these recommendations are unreasonable, just a matter of being implemented now? Okay. That was my, so again, so you're expecting acquiescence and implementation without,
Really, and if you look at the detail of these audit reports, they're just some basic controls to ensure the protection of our revenues that are being received at all these different sites. So that's why before we identify these recommendations as being complete, we as the city auditor's office want to make sure that they have been fully implemented. It takes a little time to get a feel for whether they are being implemented with so many remote locations. But of course, a lot of the controls are centralized with the recreation leaders that monitor the safety program. So a lot of our efforts will be focused on making sure that there's proper oversight of all of these safety employees.
All right. If no other questions, we'll entertain a motion to accept that motion. Motion on the floor. All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? That carries. Thank you. Item number 9.
Item number 9 is discussion and possible action on the audit of fire and rescue, fire investigations, bomb squad. Nancy Beatty is the one who led on this audit, and I will allow her to make the presentation.
Good morning, Mr. Chairman and members of the committee. As part of the annual audit plan, we completed an audit of fire and rescue, fire investigation bomb squad. Fire investigations investigates arson incidents within the city of Las Vegas boundaries and is a primary bomb squad for Clark, Nye, and Lincoln counties. The scope of our audit was limited to reviewing the functions of fire investigations. I'd like to now review some of our findings. Fire investigations is generally in compliance with federal grant requirements. Recommendations were made to improve federal grant-funded equipment property records. Fire investigations met their training requirements. However, we did make recommendations relating to the documentation for the peace officer training records. Fire investigations generally maintains their case files in a consistent manner. However, we did note some exceptions with the practice of the investigators not signing their officer reports and the senior investigator not signing for the review. We did note improvements need to be made in the evidence handling and documentation of evidence. Fire investigation generally calculates the percentage of arson incidents cleared by arrest for the uniform crime reporting. However, we did make recommendations to improve the collection of the data and the calculation of the performance indicator for fire investigations. Fire investigation does not currently track their bomb squad response times. We performed an analysis and made recommendations to provide use for bomb squad response time information. The chief of the investigation is in charge of is a state coordinator for Homeland Security grants, and he has been focused on that function, but he indicated that he would have the recommendations implemented by June 30th of this year. Is there any questions?
Comments or questions? Is someone here?
I don't know.
Fire?
Thank goodness we have no questions now.
We're going to show up if the chief isn't here. We'll go get him.
Found them to be very accommodating to you?
They're great. I was given an inside view of the operation that they've never given to anybody else before. They showed me everything. It's great.
I would make a motion to accept the report.
Motion on the floor. All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? And that motion carries. Thank you. Item number 10.
Number 10 is discussion and possible action on the Durango Hills Community Center contract compliance audit. Once again, Nancy Beatty was the lead auditor on this, and I'll ask her to make a report.
In the fall of 2007, our office completed a contract compliance audit of the agreement between the city and the YMCA for the operation of the Durango Hills Community Center at the request of the city manager's office. This community center is approximately 45,000 square feet with an adjoining pool. The center is owned by the city and operated and managed by the YMCA of Southern Nevada. The original agreement between the city and the YMCA was signed on February 5th, 2003, with an initial 5-year period and two 3-year renewal options. The initial 5-year period ended on January 21st, 2008. In May 2007, there was a change in the city staff member assigned to monitor the compliance with the agreement. This person is identified in the report as a project manager. The scope of the audit was limited to verifying compliance by city staff and YMCA for the period of January 1, 2006 through August 31st, 2007. This audit did not include an audit of the Bureau of Land Management's monitoring of the agreement or the YMCA's response to correspondence with the BLM. I would like to now review the findings. Issues relating to the compliance with NRS 426 have not been resolved. NRS 426 gives blind persons priority and right to operate vending stands in or on public buildings. Although verbal discussions occurred between the city and the YMCA, neither party notified each other in writing of their intent to renew the agreement 180 days prior to the expiration of the initial agreement term. Neither the city nor the YMCA tracked the city's percentage usage of the center. The city's analysis of the reasonableness of the center's fees in relation to those of the cities is time-consuming and subjective to differences in fee structures, programs, and program length. While city staff members prepare a comparison of the city's financial information to the Veterans Memorial Community Center, a community center with the same footprint as the Durango Hills, we were unable to identify any evidence of a routine analytical review of the center's financial information. The YMCA has not been submitting all advertising and marketing materials to the city for approval, and the materials did not include all the language stating that the center is a city-owned facility. City staff members do not monitor the city bank account used by the YMCA for the center's operations. The YMCA does not have policies in place to ensure that their suppliers and subcontractors are in compliance with the Equal Opportunity, Americans with Disability, and Drug-Free Workplace Acts. The city has not implemented procedures to ensure that the YMCA conforms to all safety regulations. The YMCA was unable to provide us with documentation showing that the certificate of deposit for the operating reserve is restricted. City staff members are not verifying that this operating reserve exists and is restricted. The general liability certificate of insurance does not include all required information. We were unable to identify any evidence that city staff members are reviewing the insurance certificates for compliance with the agreement provisions. We were unable to substantiate that current pool, health, and boiler pressure vessel operating permits have been issued. In accordance with the Amendment 1 to the agreement, the city reimburses the YMCA for the center's utility costs. These utilities are not included in the city's utility usage and cost monitoring program. The YMCA could more effectively identify energy management issues and improve the energy efficiency of the HVAC equipment. There is not a formalized central document tracking and storage process for monitoring the agreement. We provided recommendations to the current project manager for addressing these findings. These recommendations request that areas of noncompliance be corrected and that the terms of the agreement be better monitored by city. As to date, they have implemented 8 of the findings and completed. Kathleen Potter, the CFO of the YMCA, is here, as well as Brian Knudsen, who is the project manager. Would anybody have any questions?
Questions? Kathleen, Brian, do you want to add anything to that?
Unless you have questions.
again, it doesn't show which of these have been implemented. It looks like there's so many things that this is kind of one of these, you're rolling along doing a million things and a whole lot of stuff didn't get attention. My question, has a lot of stuff now gotten attention? I'm specifically concerned about some of the safety items that if an accident were to occur, all of us would get embarrassed.
What we did as part of the audit, because we're not safety officers, we had the city safety officer do a complete review of the operation. And we have they have implemented a biannual safety inspection that she will be doing at the facility. And I believe the YMCA has implemented all the recommendations she made for the safety inspection.
Well, good. That was my question, because it's not evident here. You mentioned a lot of it. I would just recommend that we have a follow-up on this one for the subsequent meeting, to make sure that implementation dates that have been agreed upon are monitored and they're fulfilling, because there are so many of these.
Right, Brian is providing us information practically on a weekly basis on to try to get everything implemented.
When were these recommendations provided to the project manager?
The audit was issued in February. We talked about it, I think in December is when we first talked to him about it.
The project manager? Is that who you're talking about?
Right.
Okay. I mean, here we are in April. Are they coming into compliance with many of the things that they...
Yes,
Works in
8 of them are completely implemented. There's a few of them we're right now working on that we're almost ready to say they've been implemented. For a few of them, there are some issues that have to be resolved. Some of them were a matter of doing an amendment to the agreement because it was no longer, we decided it was no longer an important issue.
Mr. Chairman, I'm worried about the insurance business, and this clause that has been reproduced in the report about you shall carry this much insurance and you shall name us as a co-insured on it. Completely standard with all of our projects like this.
Can I answer your concern? We did have the correct insurance requirements. It's just that the certificate of insurance didn't document exactly what that was. We've since updated the certificate of insurance with the correct information, and it's now in Brian's hands.
So what you're saying is the policy covered us, but the certificate was simply silent on that aspect?
Yeah, there were some specific items that we typically hadn't had our broker issue with most of our certificates in the past, and we just did the standard certificate for this as well, and it was discovered through the audit process that it was missing some items. So we've since updated that.
But my question was, the policy named us?
Oh, absolutely.
Okay. I'm less concerned about the certificate than I am the actual
Kathleen, could
policy.
you identify yourself for the record?
I'm Kathleen Potter. I'm the CFO of the YMCA.
My perspective on this is simply that when we started this, it was a pilot program. Contractually, we had a good solid contract in place, but as it has been indicated, there was not a lot of attention to specific details. And for instance, the 10% that the city is allowed to program, it's in the contract, and it's always been a handshake agreement almost, that if the city wants it, they have it, and those kind of things are becoming better defined. And certainly I'll put on the record that since Brian has taken over, probably spending a lot more time than he ever anticipated on this, I want to acknowledge him on the record. He's done a great job in working with the Y, working with the city staff, and certainly keeping our office up to date. So we appreciate that. If no other comments or questions, entertain a motion.
Make that motion.
There's a motion on the floor. All those in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? And that motion carries. Thank you, Nancy. Item number 11, citizen participation. Is there anyone wishing to speak to the audit committee? Seeing no one, thank